After reviewing a bunch of relatively inexpensive keyboard options to upgrade your setup in 2023, now it's time to go over some fairly priced desktop audio gear to improve your gaming, music listening, and movie watching experience. So in today's video, part 2 of this 3-part series, we'll take a look at some great deals on IEMs, headphones, and a killer DAC amp combo that sound great without breaking the bank. Hello and welcome to IOSam. I'm Sam Franco, and this is a channel where I do tech reviews and show you how to build, fix, and mod all sorts of computer gear. In today's video, part 2 of this home office upgrades for the new year series, we are checking out one DAC amp combo, 2 IEMs, and 3 headphones, all ranging from $30 to $160. These parts were picked based on the best value for money of all competitively priced premium desktop audio gear I have tried in 2022. And then on the upcoming part 3, we'll go through a few useful home office accessories to help you lighten up, clean, organize, and improve the comfort of your desk space. So stay tuned to this channel for that in the next few days. As for disclaimers, the first thing I'd like to point out here is that I do not consider myself an audiophile as per the current definition of the word in audio gear forums out there. This means I do not measure frequencies using professional benchmarking gear and will not use the types of fancy descriptors most specialized audio YouTube channels use to explain sounds. And I will not touch on the subject of equalizing through software the frequency response of each of the IEMs and headphones I'll show here, since that is a topic advanced enough to deserve its own video in the future. The goal for this video is to provide an easy introduction and a sensible suggestion list of cost-effective audio equipment based on a few different use cases for anyone who wants to improve their audio gear without spending the insane amounts of money one could spend with hi-fi products out there. All parts being reviewed here were acquired with my own money. As usual, there will be links for everything in the video description below, and most of those will be affiliate links that can generate revenue to help support this channel without any additional cost to you if you decide to use them. So let's start with a good and inexpensive DAC and amp combo. But just in case you don't know what a DAC, an amplifier, or a combo of both are, or why you need them, let's first go through a very quick crash course here. A DAC is a digital to analog converter. In a very simplistic explanation, is either a device or just an integrated circuit that transforms the data within your digital files, or those files transmitted online through music and video stream services, into analog sound data that your speakers and headphones can understand and then play back to your ears. But for that to happen, the analog audio information generated by the DAC, after it's done interpreting the digital source, needs to be properly amplified by another circuit so that those sound waves can actually get to your speakers and headphones, travel through their magnets and coils, and then move their diaphragms, which in turn will move the air that will carry the sound to your ears. While we're surrounded by DACs and amps everywhere these days, in our desktops, laptops, tablets, and phones, the integrated DACs and amps in those devices are more often than not just crap. In the sense they usually introduce noise and unwanted distortion to the audio source and might fail to extract nuanced audio information from quality source audio material. Good DACs and amps that can properly translate digital audio data into analog information with high fidelity are usually more expensive than the standard stuff most manufacturers put on consumer electronics, since they also require proper implementation in terms of good PCB design, quality components, good power delivery, etc. And that is why discrete DACs and amps that are designed and manufactured by companies that actually care about the quality of the audio you're getting through their equipment is one of the biggest improvements you can make to your setup. Not only in terms of getting clean and realistic sound out of your music, movies, and games, but also in terms of immersion. So the first thing on this list, it's iFi's new Uno DAC amplifier combo that retails for $80. This is the cheapest and smallest DAC amp ever made by iFi. And in case you don't know, iFi has a legendary status as one of the premium brands of home audio and hi-fi equipment out of the UK. And they became particularly famous in the last couple of years with the release of the widely acclaimed Zen DAC. Their first entry-level oriented desktop audio released in 2020 for an incredible $130 at the time, but which unfortunately had its price raised considerably since. So the Uno is their newest attempt to have an even bigger market impact, but now in the sub $100 entry-level segment. So the idea here was to create a super compact, high-resolution DAC amp unit that can be powered by the same USB connection that carries the data from your computer to this tiny device. So no need for bulky power supplies here. At just 92 grams and not bigger than a box of mints, this thing might just be the perfect desktop or mobile setup companion for less than $100. This is a plug-and-play device that requires no drivers to be used with both Windows and Mac computers. Just plug the included USB cable in your machine, turn it on with the volume knob, and it will immediately get identified by the OS as an iFi audio output device. You get a single-ended 3.5mm headphone jack in the front and a preamp stereo RCA output in the back that you can use to connect to speakers or, as I did in my setup, to channel the audio into another amplifier. The volume knob is on the front and is very small. It feels great and has a nice click when you turn it on or off though. It also lights up with a nice background glow when the unit is on. In the front you also have equalizer and gain switches. The EQ button lets you switch between 4 different tunings. EQ off, or tunings for gain, video, and music, which will light up their corresponding icon on the top of the unit. What these settings translate in terms of an EQ curve are flat and neutral in the off position, boost on high frequencies in the gaming position that will help you better hear footsteps, boost on mid frequencies in the video position that will emphasize speech, and boost on lower frequencies on the music position that will emphasize bass. Now, that doesn't mean these boosts are exaggerated in any way. They're subtle, but they do make a difference. The power match button is just a gain switch that will boost the amplifier power for higher impedance headphones. The Uno can decode audio in DSD, DXD, MQA, and PCM, but the one 99% of people will use is PCM. Now to the best part. How does this thing actually sound? Well, in short, incredible for its price. While I don't consider myself an audiophile, as I mentioned before, the type that will argue DACs, amps, speakers, and headphone specs on forums all day, I am definitely an audio enthusiast. I spend a lot of time in front of my computer listening to music. I mostly listen to rock and electronic, watching movies and YouTube videos and playing games. And I can say that to me, the Uno sounds basically as good as the more expensive Zen. The Zen has a more powerful amplifier, giving 330 milliwatts at 32 ohms versus the Uno's 211, and it uses a Burr Brown DAC chip, while the Uno has an ESS Sabre. But for the uses for which the Uno is intended for, it has enough juice to power anything but the most crazy high impedance enthusiast headphones out there, which is not what 99.9% of us use on a daily basis. For headphones up to 300 ohms, this amp has more than enough power to blow your eardrums out. Don't do that. With my 300 ohms drop Sennheiser HD6XX, for example, with the power match switch on, I had the volume knob at 12 o'clock for a comfortable volume for hard rock tracks. And anything over 1 o'clock started to get too loud for my taste. And the best thing about a high-quality DAC amp combo like this is the noise level. iFi claims this unit has less than 0.02% of total harmonic distortion plus noise for the headphone output with 1.27 volts at 16 ohms, which translates to 0 hiss when there's nothing playing and no undesirable distortion at high volumes. The main reason I was in the market for a portable DAC amp that sounds good, it doesn't break the bank, was for me to be able to use it with my laptop. While I have plenty of powerful DACs and amps for my desktop, in fact it would be fair to say I have too many of them, and I can totally justify each one of them, I promise. I wanted something small and relatively powerful to use on the road with my Razer Blade 14. Razer laptops are great. I'd even say they are as premium as you can get on the Windows world. But while the headphone amp on my Blade 14 is usable in a pinch, it is still noisy for my taste. I also wanted a DAC amp combo that I could use in my home office where I keep my laptop on the side for different tasks, and that could channel the audio of the laptop to my main desktop amp, which is an SMSL SP200. Since the Uno has RCA preamp outputs in the back, I just plugged those to my single-ended RCA inputs of my SP200. And now I can, with the flip of a switch, choose between the desktop computer audio that comes from the balanced connection from my SMSL M200 DAC, or the laptop audio that comes from the single-ended connection from the iFi Uno with the same headphone, which is super convenient. So who do I think the iFi Uno is recommended for? I think that anyone who watches movies and videos, listens to music, and plays games at their computers should, if their budgets allow for, have a discrete DAC and headphone amp. Discrete devices like this will always be better shielded against electromagnetic interference when compared to those integrated into computer motherboards. They will also always sound nicer, cleaner, and offer more power. And they offer the convenience of an easy-to-reach headphone jack and volume control at your desktop without the need of any software. The fact the iFi Uno is such a powerful, compact unit that sounds unbelievably nice for $80 makes this my standard recommendation to anyone who still doesn't have a discrete DAC amp and don't want to spend audiophile money on one. Also, for mobile setups like mine, where I carry a laptop, wireless keyboard and mice, and either a small cost KPH30i headphones or an IEM in my bag, the iFi Uno is the perfect DAC amp to carry around. If you have a bigger budget and would like a nicer and heavier unit with a big volume knob, or if you're an online gamer who would like to also have a microphone amplifier integrated to your DAC amp, then I suggest spending a bit more money and getting a shit Fula that comes with one. But for everyone else, the Uno is a better deal for a $30 price difference. If you're a hobbyist designing your own keyboard, or an industry veteran looking to bring your next consumer electronics product to life, do yourself a favor and check out PCBWay's services in PCBs prototyping, manufacturing, and assembly, as well as in CNC machining, injection molding, and 3D printing. Regardless if you're looking into building a single prototype, completing a small batch production run, or searching for a high-volume OEM production partner, PCBWay is the leading one-stop shop solution that offers everything you need. Fast turnaround times, all the latest tech in PCB fabrication, access to the highest quality materials and parts from the most trusted suppliers in the industry, an easy-to-use interface to submit your designs, and a team of experts to help you during the whole process. Check the video description below for more information and for $5 off your first order with PCBWay.com. And huge thanks to PCBWay for sponsoring this channel. Now let's move on to some good IEMs, but before that, let's just clear out what I mean by IEMs here. IEM is an acronym that stands for in-ear monitor, the kind of earphone that you stick into your ear instead of just loosely placing or hanging it, as is the case with earbuds. Today though, whenever people say IEM instead of earphone or earbud, it also tends to imply more of a hi-fi gear directed at prosumers, audiophiles, and professionals that tend to care more about audio fidelity than the rest of the regular consumers. And this means most products sold as IEMs today usually have more sophisticated drivers, are built with better materials, can have special ear tips, and detachable cables among other niceties. And speaking of cables, while you see people marketing wireless IEMs out there, I'd warn you that the vast majority of good IEMs will most likely be wired, since wireless ones have a much more compressed sound than that of fully analog wired sets because of the digital encoding required there. IEMs also beat traditional full-size headphones in portability, since they're much smaller and lighter than big cans and can easily travel with you without the bulk. And they also tend to be easier to drive from a phone or a laptop when compared to larger headphones and their bigger and more power-hungry drivers. So if you have any application where sound quality and portability are factors, IEMs can be the perfect solution. But here I say can be because IEMs are not for everybody as far as comfort goes, simply because their in-ear nature can be a problem for a lot of people that claim skin irritation, ear fatigue, and a lot of other comfort-related problems. So you should obviously consider that aspect as well before committing money to an IEM, especially if you intend to buy a premium one that can easily cost over $100 these days. But for the first IEM we'll cover here, we'll go with a super budget-friendly option, the ultra-popular Blond BL03, that you can now get it at a $35 price. And since price is an important aspect of all the gear I'm covering here today, the current pricing of the BL03 is basically what gives it such a long life in the current market that is flooded with options for IEMs under $50. But it is an undeniable fact that the BL03 has been one of the top-selling budget IEMs in the last 3 years. And there are plenty of good reasons for it. It offers great sound and great form factor for an insanely competitive price. One of my favorite aspects of this set is its shape. I have tried other similarly priced IEMs, but the reason why I keep coming back to the BL03 is its shape, which for some reason stays put in my ears and simply will not budge. The fact that it stays much closer and perfectly tucked into the curves of my ears gives it a better center of gravity than other larger and more squarish IEMs that protrude much further out. And that is certainly a factor in the way the BL03 fits me. Its nozzles are on the shorter side, which at least in my opinion makes it more comfortable than other IEMs with longer tubes that reach deeper into your ear canals. Although this could present a fitting issue for some people when using the stock ear tips, but after upgrading it with some aftermarket foam tips we'll discuss later, I had zero issues with fitting and sound isolation. And while it is made out of metal, it does not feel heavy at all to me. So all these factors combined makes this one of the most comfortable budget IEMs I have tried to date. I can use these things for hours without any fatigue. Since the BL03 came out, there have been tons of new products in the market, but for some reason, getting budget IEMs with a good fit seems to be the most challenging part. Not even Blon itself has been able to surpass the fit of the BL03 with the bulkier BL05 and their even bulkier recent dual driver BL Max. On the sound quality side, these are, for the lack of a better term, simply awesome. They have a moderately V-shaped sound when referring to its frequency response graph, with a warm tuning that is guaranteed to be a crowd pleaser. And by warm here, I mean a very good, deep, and most importantly, very clear bass that gives you great mid and good sub bass that doesn't feel muddy. I believe that some of its good bass come from the good fit and seal in my ears, which became even better with the Dakoni Bullets foam tips I used to upgrade my BL03. So gunshots and explosions on games and movies, or the beats of hip-hop and EDM, will really pop on these things. The mid frequencies here are slightly recessed, as it usually goes with V-shaped tuning, so they can feel a bit overshadowed by the bass, and that means you don't get super intimate vocals. But on the positive side, that can make vocals a bit less shouty on some rock and pop tracks. The high frequencies are there, but are very tamed, and this means you will never puncture your eardrums with sharp treble, which is another thing that I know will please the vast majority of music listeners out there. In terms of sound stage, these are obviously much narrower than larger headphones or more expensive IEMs featuring multiple drivers. So here you get a smaller stage with a sound that feels much closer to your head than with, say, an open back headphone, where you tend to have a much better three-dimensional experience. As for sound separation, it is very good, especially when you, again, consider the price here. This obviously will not beat newer IEMs in the $50 to $70 range in terms of instrument separation or the ability to pick each and every sound in a game, for example. But at $35, you're still getting a much better experience in that area than with your average AirPods. In the volume range I usually listen to, and even when pushing all the way to what I would consider uncomfortably loud, there is basically no distortion to speak of, and none of the metallic timbre that plagues so many budget IEMs out there. If you use a decent DAC with good quality music files here, you'll get as clear sound as you can possibly get for $35. The only real criticism I could give to the BL03 would be on the resolution side of things, which it will lose a bit to other competitors in the $50 price range, such as the 10 T2s, for example, especially in the higher frequencies. But despite that, I'd still pick the BL03 over the T2s for an all-rounder IEM, since its nicer tonality and better bass response will make it a better Swiss Army knife type of earphone for movies, casual gaming, and most genres of music. As I mentioned before, the body of these IEMs is metal through and through, and the finish is astonishingly good for its price. Even though it has a polished, shiny finish, it does not look grimy and foggy, even after a lot of handling. The included tips are okay, not terrible and not great either, but about what you'd expect for the price. If you're willing to spend another $13 on some Dakoni Bullets memory foam tips, you then take the BL03 to the next level. The Bullets will improve the fit and seal in your ears, which will make the bass response here even better. So this would be a highly recommended upgrade if you ask me. Now for the worst part of this kit. The cable. The included cable terminates in a 3.5mm plug, like pretty much all IEMs do, but I have to say that this stock cable kinda sucks. It's plasticky and feels cheap. It is also difficult to untangle and can be uncomfortable when touching your skin behind your ears and neck. But because the cable is detachable, it was easy to upgrade the stock cable with a Linsol Triple Win Zoni that looks and feels much better, with the extra advantage of never getting tangled in storage. It is another $20 to upgrade the cable, and I know that by the time you replace the cable and the ear tips with good aftermarket options such as these, the total price of this kit has already doubled. But considering how competitively priced the BL03 is nowadays, even at $70, it still sounds as good as most $70 IEMs out there. And now, closing off the build quality chapter, I have a very important caveat about this IEM. My original BL03, bought on March 12th of 2020, precisely 3 years ago when I'm recording this video, finally failed on me. And it did so while I was producing this video. The problem was with the right earphone, that lost half of its volume. Initially, I thought it could be a problem with the cable, but after trying it with multiple compatible cables, it became clear to me that the right driver had indeed failed. So yeah, while it does feel relatively high quality in your hands for the price, it is still a $35 IEM. so I guess we should not expect a huge lifetime out of these things. But having said all that, for 35 bucks, I just went ahead and bought another pair. Because even if it lasts just 3 years, it is still a good deal for the amount of use I get out of these and for its sound quality, even if it is disposable after 3 years of heavy use. My use of the BL03 is mostly as a monitor for when I'm recording audio on my desktop or for any video conference where I don't want people to see me wearing huge cans on my head. But I also carry it on trips to listen to music on my Sony Walkman portable player or watch movies on my laptop. And because of its rich and warm sound, and after my upgrades how comfortable it is to wear during long periods of time, it makes for a perfect travel companion. I don't use it for desktop gaming because I prefer the larger sound stage and spatial cues that you can get from larger headphones, but when traveling I can comfortably play some relaxing sessions of single-player games with these on my Razer Blade 14 if I have to. My suggested use cases for the BL03 would be mostly music and movies, since those are the two main applications that can take advantage of its top-notch bass response. I think this set is particularly good for rock, pop, and hip-hop tracks, but less so for jazz, symphonies, and other more instrumental music in general. In terms of passive sound isolation, it is very good for a normal environment, such as home or office use. And if you replace the stock ear tips for some good memory foam ones, it can block outside noise even better for using on airplanes or public transportation, for example. In terms of amplification, IEMs in general are too low impedance to require an amplifier, so you don't necessarily need one here with the BL03's 32 ohms. But these can be sensitive enough to take advantage of a good and clean sounding DAC to really shine. Now for my second suggestion of good IEMs under $100, I'll go with a very different pick, costing significantly more than the previous set at $99. The one with the best passive sound isolation out there, the Etymotic ER2XR, where the XR version stands for Extended Response, which in this case means more bass, but that you can also go with the SE version that has a flatter frequency response. But unlike with the BL03, this set doesn't have boomy bass. The bass here is much more on the clinical side, so this will be my recommendation for those who need as much sound isolation as possible, but without going the route of active sound cancellation earphones that could still cost more than this set. The ER2 has Etymotic's classic thin barrel design that relies on deep insertion to achieve its superb sound isolation. And this is a very old design at this point, having its origins in the early 90s, which means it takes a completely different approach from that of most modern IEMs, which in turn were all heavily inspired by Shure's classic line of professional IEMs. And this design has its pros and cons, of course. The main advantage here is how small these drivers are. If you properly insert them into your ear canal, they become almost invisible. And because they're ultra light and get lodged so deep into your ears, they'll basically never fall out, which is great. But its design focused on perfectly sealing the driver into your ears also brings its main disadvantage for some people. The fact that placing it in your ears is not exactly trivial, and if you don't place them properly, they'll sound teeny and will feel uncomfortable. But I can say that if you learn how to insert them in an angle and push them until all the silicone flanges are inside of your ear canal, and then pull them back ever so slightly to lock it in position, they can be comfortable and unnoticeable after a while given how light they are. At any rate, Etymotic does include foam tips in the box, at least in the limited edition I have here, so if you don't like the flange tips design, you can always fall back to the more traditional memory foam tips that are easier to use in the sense they are more forgiving if you don't push the drivers deep enough into your ear canal. Another good thing about these newer and revised lines of deep insertion IEMs from Etymotic is that they now have removable cables. In the sound quality side of things, while they sound insanely good for such small drivers, here you're not gonna get the V-shaped sound that is more popular with the masses. The focus of the Etymotic IEM range is to be neutral and flat. And by flat here, I mean no frequencies are overpowering the others. Which means that flat EQ'd audio equipment like this allows you to hear more of the music, including details that can get buried under boomy bass and sibilant treble of some V-shaped IEMs and headphones out there. So Etymotic's XR version of their newer IEM lines are meant to offer less clinical and a bit more relaxed sounding version of their earphones. Now, don't get me wrong, the bass boost you're going to get with the XR version is not something that will blow your mind if you're a bass head. XR here means it has a slight but more noticeable bass presence. But it is not overpowering and it does not bury the mid frequencies, which at least for my taste is a good thing, especially when I'm in the mood for some critical listening. The mids here are much clearer than what you get on a V-shaped EQ, such as the BL03 for example. So vocals have more presence and sound much more intimate. as well as instrumental music, especially those with lots of piano, guitar, and brass instruments. In my opinion, the quality of the mids you get here are the main reason to get these IEMs, other than its stellar outside noise isolation, of course. And on the high frequency side, the ER2, just like the BL03, is very tamed and non-offensive, meaning it will not give too much treble details and sparkle, but it will also not fatigue you in longer sessions, especially if you are a bit more treble sensitive. Another thing the ER2 has in common with the BL03 is the relatively narrow sound stage, so not a lot of three-dimensionality here. Sounds are close and very intimate, as you'd expect for a single small driver IEM that sits so close to your eardrums. But the overall resolution, detail, and instrument separation you get here is above average for this price class. So for critical listening, especially for vocal-intensive tracks and rich instrumental music such as jazz and classic, the ER2 will excel. The ER2 in both its versions will offer you crystal clear and precise sound with no distortion, while isolating you from the world outside with its insanely effective ear seal, either with its included silicone flange tips or with their foam ones. As for this specific XR version, while I'm not a bass head myself, I opted for the bass boosted version in this case since the SE version sounded a bit too clinical for my taste. I found that the XR extends well into the sub-bass frequencies, which gives music a bit more body, but with very tight and precise lower frequencies. Zero muddiness here. The ER2 body is made out of aluminum with no crossovers of any kind, which gives it small size and light weight without compromising its durability. Now, one flaw that old Etymotic IEMs had in the past was their cable that would inevitably fail, leaving you with no way to replace them. With these newer models that now have replaceable cables, that is no longer a concern. The cable terminates in a 3.5mm plug, and while smooth and malleable, will get entangled very easily. So you might want to use one of those earphone silicone cases, which you can roll the wire around, instead of the little pouch that it comes with in the box. The other big problem with the cable is its microphonics, which is the sound you hear through the driver when the cable rubs against your clothing. This is unfortunately something unavoidable with any Etymotic IEM, which is what makes them more suitable for desktop use than as a portable set to be used on the go. Now, the included ear tips are very good, and the fact that you get both their trademarked flanged silicone and memory foam tips in the box, at least in the limited edition I have here, is also great, since you get more options to better fit these in your ears. My main use of the ER2 is at home, either working or listening to music on my desk, plugged into either my iFi DAC amps or listening to music or podcasts in my old iPod or my Sony Walkman in bed when I want to tune out and eventually fall asleep. It works great for that. As for the types of content I use these for, I'll reach out for them for downtempo electronica, rich vocal tracks, and the occasional smooth jazz or for podcasts, since these do a stellar job for spoken word content as well. My suggested use cases for the ER2 would be for those types of vocal-intensive or instrumental music. These can also work well for movies, if they are more dialogue-focused, since these are so good for human voice. But for action flicks with lots of loud sound effects and explosions, you'd be better off with the BL03. For gaming, while these offer very clear and accurate sound positioning, I don't think you get good enough sound stage to help you pick the distance where things are happening on a game. So here, again, I would not recommend this IEM for competitive gaming, but it could work for single-player casual games where the soundtrack is more important than the audio cues. The relatively flat equalization here also makes these IEMs perfect for monitoring audio and video editing applications, since they don't color the sound too much. And then there is the use where these are basically perfect for anything that requires you to completely shut off the sounds from the outside world. So if you work in a noisy environment or you want to leave the sound of coworkers, children, or pets outside of your head, that's when this thing really shines. And in terms of amplification, this guy will work on anything. With just 15 ohms of impedance, you could drive these from a potato. And now let's move on to some traditional headphones. And here I'll cover 3 options, an extreme budget one and 2 others that are still value choices but on a couple of price tiers higher. And here again, let me just give a quick bit of context about the types of headphones I'll cover and why I picked them. The world of headphones is a large and very complicated one. You have good products starting at around $30 all the way to multiple thousands of dollars. You have the ones that sit in your ears and the big cans that fit around them. You have the closed back ones and the open back ones, the wired and the wireless, the dynamics and the planar magnetics. But as a short introduction here, it will be far beyond the scope of this video to cover all these differences. So let's just quickly go through the 3 main differences of the 2 types of headphones I picked here, and why I think these would be a good choice for a home office setup. The first one is the size and fit, which the ultra-budget Koss KPH30i is a small on-ears type, while the other two value-oriented HiFiMan HE-R70X and the Beyerdynamic DT770 Pro are on the more traditional large headphones over the years design. The second is that the smaller Koss, by the nature of its size, fitting, and design, has a semi-open back, meaning you have less sound isolation and more sound leak, but a more spacious sound. While the larger HiFiMan and Beyerdynamic are closed back for the opposite effect, more isolation and less leaks, which means you tend to also get a smaller sound stage than with open back sets. And the third is that I picked three options with different impedances here. The HiFiMan with a very low 16 ohms, the Koss with a mid-level 60 ohms, and the Beyerdynamic in a high impedance configuration with 250 ohms. Headphone impedance is a massive topic, and like everything else in the world today, a hugely debatable one. But to try to sum it up in one sentence, impedance determines how easy or hard it is to drive a headphone in terms of amplification. And as for the reasons to pick a high or low impedance headphone, it usually relies on the type of equipment you intend to use it with, and, according to some people, how fast or slow the drivers will respond to sound frequencies. As for why I think these variations are good picks for an office or home office environment, while each of these phones have wildly different specs, I could break the choices down to price, portability, sound isolation, ease of setup, and type of sound tuning. Starting with the lowest price choice, the Koss KPH30i, this would be my suggestion for anyone who is on a very tight budget but still wants a pair of headphones that can sound good, perform well in multiple applications, and don't require a complicated or expensive setup. The form factor here is super oral, or on the ears. It derives from Koss' own old classics such as their P19 from 1982, the Porta Pro from 1984, and the KTX Pro 1 from 2002. The newer KPH30i came out in 2017, but it still carries a lot of the same vintage looks that made Koss and other brands popular in the late 70s and early 80s. It has an all-plastic construction with a silicone suspended headband that, together with its lightweight, makes this super comfortable for long sessions. Although you do get some clamping force here, which helps to keep it firmly placed in your head, but might cause some discomfort for people more sensitive to this type of tight fit. But what makes the KPH30i so special is its sound. It is just incredible how good this thing sounds for its price. Here we're back to the popular V-shaped sound with a good amount of bass, slightly recessed mids, and good and present treble without any sharp edges. And the area where it really shines is in its sound stage, that is surprisingly wide on these, which makes it great for live music recordings, movies, and even gaming. I'd say this is exactly what you want for a light and portable set like this. Its warm sound is the definition of relaxed listening. While the resolution here is not high, the sound is still very balanced. The bass is surprisingly tight with great presence, but without stepping too much on the mids, which, while are not the set's strong point, it is still there and provides a soft tone that will be very forgiving to low bitrate streamed music's vocal tracks. The high frequencies here are ever so slightly more present than the mids, but it still follows the same tendency for softness that the KPH30i is known for. So while it is not designed for critical listening, it will work exceptionally well for some casual music, movies and YouTube videos, Zoom and Discord calls, and even for some casual gaming. The body is all plastic, which gives it slight weight, with a very comfortable suspended silicone strap. It is easy to adjust, but it will lock itself into position once placed over your head. The foam pads are thin, but they do their job to prevent you from feeling the hard parts of the driver from cutting into your ears. At any rate, there are mods you can make to add large foam cups designed for Grado headphones to improve the sound isolation and comfort of the KPH30i, especially if you find its clamping force too strong. The wires are attached here, but they are very high quality and don't get entangled easily. The cable is long enough at 1.2 meters, with an inline microphone on the left side with a single button remote, which is great for using it with a mobile phone, and terminating in a 3.5mm plug. I use the KPH30i as a quick and easy backup headphone that I can use in a pinch if I don't want to put on one of my regular larger headphones, or for quick Zoom calls where I don't have time to arrange a more elaborate mic setup, since the KPH30i is not too bulky, and here I can easily attach my wireless Antlion mod mic to it. It has also traveled with my mobile setup a few times for the same conference call purposes, as well as for music, movies, YouTube videos, and even video editing on the go. This thing sounds so good and costs so little that having one of these around or in my bag is almost a no-brainer. The KPH30i is just an extremely versatile headphone that sounds so much better than its low price tag would imply. With its V-shaped sound, it works great for pop, rock, country, and EDM, and with its wide sound stage, it also works well for movies, TV shows, and even casual gaming. And with its $30 price, these are a great option to use where you don't want to have an expensive set of headphones around, such as in an office setting, for example. But even for use at home, it is hard to beat it in simplicity, resilience, and sound quality if you can't spend more than 30 bucks. It is a great jack of all trades that will sound better than your AirPods while costing a fraction of the price and not requiring recharges. It is also light and easy to throw in your bag and take it anywhere. You can easily drive it with any mobile device. Now, moving on to full-size headphones, I believe that closed-back sets are more versatile for multiple uses than open-back ones. Yes, there is a case to be made that open-back ones usually sound better and have larger sound stages, but unless you have a relatively quiet environment with no people around, they just don't work as well as closed backs that block sound from moving in or out of the cups. And my first choice for a good closed back set is one of Hi-Fi Man's collaborations with Drop, the HE-R7DX, that has a regular price of $149, but that can regularly be bought for $99 on Drop's regular sales. The R7DX has one part of its design that shares a similar form factor with many other Hi-Fi Mans before it, a simple steel headband with these two discs on the side where the driver's metal sliders run through. I suspect the size of the headband here might be good enough to cover even the largest heads out there, since I have quite a big head myself and still use this in the middle position. The metal fork holding the large 50mm drivers is all metal and can be tilted to adjust to your head, but they don't fold for storage or rest more comfortably on your neck though. Now, the two things that make this model quite different from pretty much any other Hi-Fi Man I've ever seen before is the fact that it is a closed back and uses a dynamic driver, instead of open back planar magnetics they're better known for. The big drivers have a slightly oval shape, have plastic housings that are very deep so the drivers don't touch my ears, but they feel nice, although not luxurious or anything like that, and help to keep the weight down. This is a very light headphone for its size. Its weight, together with its light clamping force and good quality hybrid pads, with synthetic leather on the outside and fabric where it touches your face, makes this a very comfortable headphone. The pads are removable, but I could not find aftermarket replacements anywhere at this point, which could be a future concern depending on how well these hold up with long-term use. The detachable cable is fantastic here. It has 1.5 meters in length and connects to the drivers with universal 2.5mm jacks, which means they're easily replaceable and they're very flexible, smooth, and have no microphonics. And the fact they have a Y-split design with individual connections to each driver means you could replace these with a balanced cable if you ever decide to drive this headphone out of a balanced amplifier. The HE-R7DX is a flat-sounding headphone, which, as I explained earlier when discussing the Etymotic ER2, means it does not emphasize any particular frequency range. So here you don't get gut-punching bass or ear-piercing treble, which also means the mids don't get stepped on by these other frequencies, making these phones very good for vocal tracks and instrumental music. But the mids are not necessarily forward, as I guess you could say of some popular Sennheiser headphones, but they are very clear and very easy to pick apart different voices and harmonic sections, for example. The bass here is on the lean side. It is there, and it is very precise, but it doesn't have the body from other V-shaped tuned headphones. So, no sub-bass rumble here. The treble frequencies are not what I would call forward, but you do get some sparkle, air, and a bit more presence than you'd get on the other flat EQ'd set we covered here before, the Etymotic ER2 for example, but not enough to be sibilant or piercing. The sound stage is very wide for a closed-back headphone, possibly the widest I have ever tried for one. Together with its good sound separation and good positioning and directional cues, this wide stage makes this the perfect audio and video editing monitor, as well as a very good gaming headphone. On the topic of sound isolation as a closed-back set, it performs better than any open-back model, of course. But because the R7DX has very little clamping force, it does not isolate as much as the Beyerdynamic DT770, for example. So what you get on the comfort side of things, you lose a bit on the sound isolation part. The structure of the HE-R7DX is made out of metal on all the parts that matter, such as the headband and the fork that holds the drivers. The actual driver's enclosures are made out of plastic, but they feel fairly durable. The foam used on the pads does not seem to be memory foam, but it is breathable and very comfortable. And the hybrid design here ensures little sound leaks on the sides with its synthetic leather and comfort on inside part with breathable fabric where it touches your skin. The adjustment rails are very stiff, which means they stick very well to the position you put them on. The 1.5 meter detachable cable is straight, has a slight rubbery coating, and has good quality connectors. The AG-R7DX is now my main audio and video editing headphones. Its perfectly flat EQ and good sound separation makes it ideal for that type of application where you don't want any frequencies to be pushed too forward or backwards. Also, because it is closed back, I can shut off most of the street sounds and the noise from inside the house, which helps a lot with my concentration when working. It is also a good set to use in the summer, since it covers well the noises of my loud AC unit and its hybrid pads don't get excessively hot on my ears despite the headphone's closed-back design. Its lightweight is also a huge bonus, since I can wear these all day and forget they're there, which is great. I also like the R7DX for first-person shooting games, since its spatial sound and tight treble gives me very good directional and placement cues. Following the theme of this video, the AG-R7DX is also a very versatile piece of kit. With its flat sound, it is a great pick for content creation, while also working well for music critical listening, watching videos, and even some FPS gaming. With its high level of comfort, you can use these all day without much fatiguing. And while this is not exactly the build like a tank type of headphone, such as the Beyerdynamic we're covering next, I have good reasons to believe this set will hold up well with long-term use. Having removable and replaceable pads and cable will certainly help in that regard. With its ultra-low 16 ohms impedance, you can easily drive these phones out of literally anything, which also helps with its versatility and portability. As for pricing, while its regular $149 is fair for its features and performance, I suggest you keep an eye on Drop's weekend and seasonal sales, since they routinely lower its price to $99, which then makes it a pretty good bargain in my opinion. And let's now close the headphones chapter with an ageless German classic, the Beyerdynamic DT770 Pro, for its regular price of $159 for my 250 ohms version, but which its price can vary depending on which of its many variations you happen to go with. And I say classic because these things originally came out in 1985 and have been in production with very few modifications since then. The fact these cans are still some of the most widely used headphones in professional applications in the world speaks volumes on its quality and performance. The DT770 Pro was originally designed to be a studio headphone, mostly focused at recordings. And as such, you can see that all the design choices made here were to make it as comfortable as possible, but without any compromises in its ruggedness and durability, and also to produce as little sound leaks as possible, to avoid having the sound looping back into the microphone during recording sessions. It also uses the same basic materials than the Hi-Fi Man we just saw in the previous chapter: steel for the headband and forks, plastic for the driver's housings, and regular foam for the pads, although the pads here have a velour lining. Both the sizing and tilting adjustments still work well for my large head shape though, and it is extremely comfortable as we'll discuss in a bit. It uses 45mm dynamic drivers that are wired together through a single thin wire that runs inside the headband and then sending the stereo signal through a single-ended attached cable from the left driver. The fact that it still uses a permanently attached cable might be its biggest shortcoming for today's standards, although you can replace them if you happen to be good with a soldering iron. Beyerdynamic gives you the option to pick the DT770 Pro in 32, 80, and 250 ohms variants depending on your application. The 32s would be great for relaxed and casual home use since they don't require any amplification. The 250s I have here, with its faster drivers, would be strictly for professional use since they definitely require an amplifier. And the 80 ohms version would be a middle-of-the-road compromise where you get a bit tighter frequencies than the 32 ohms version while still using it without an amp. Unlike the Hi-Fi Man AG-R7DX, the DT770 Pro has a slightly more V-shaped sound, since you get powerful bass and very pronounced treble here, which Beyerdynamic happens to be well known for. But they don't muddy the mids on my 250 ohms though, which would be one reason to go with this high impedance one over the other variants. The bass on the 250 ohms achieves the amazing feat of being powerful and precise at the same time. They never feel muddy on my ears, which helps this version to preserve the clarity of its mid-frequencies. The treble is also very pronounced, with plenty of air and detail, which is something you want for professional use, but can be a detracting factor for some people when using this for relaxed music listening, for example. But remember, while you could use this headphone for music listening, its main focus is content production. So its sharper high frequencies here have a reason to be there. And the other thing the DT770 does better than most other closed-back headphones out there is soundstage, which is very good on these. They do lose in that area to the much newer and far more modern Hi-Fi Man AG R70X, but the Beyer is still impressive on that regard, especially when you consider how ancient this design is in 2023. Now, one thing the DT770 handily beats the R70X, though, is in passive sound isolation. The higher clamping force of the Pro variant of the DT770 is very effective in shutting off the noises from outside, and the fact that it can do that without feeling uncomfortable is quite an achievement here. And another area where the DT770 Pro is very hard to beat is in its build quality and durability. These are the proverbial built like a tank headphones. The plastic they use for the enclosures help to keep the weight in check, but it is still thick enough to feel almost unbreakable. And the texture they use here helps to hide any scratches. That is also quite an ingenious design choice. The foam pads covered in velour is possibly one of the most comfortable pads I have ever tried. They feel plushy without being too hot. The ear pad designs from Beyerdynamic are one of the high points of their product lines, although they do wear out, and when they do, they also change the sound of the headphone, which tends to lose some of its bass and treble boost as the pads flatten out with use and move the drivers closer to your ears. Luckily, Beyerdynamic sells pretty much all the parts you need to maintain your DT770 in top shape, and replacing the pads is a relatively easy process. The adjustment of rails are not too soft or too stiff, so they're very easy to set and forget. My 250 ohm comes with 3 meters coiled cable that is very convenient to my use case, since it expands when you need the distance and then compresses back when you don't. But the lower impedance versions comes with straight cables. The DT770 Pro has been my main headphone for content creation for years now. And while I have replaced it for the R70X for video editing, because I find its flat EQ a bit more revealing than the DT770's boosted bass and treble, I still go back to the Beyerdynamic anytime I need better sound isolation, if I have a neighbor mowing his lawn for example, or if I want to test my mix with a V-shaped headphone to see how it sounds in a more colored EQ environment. One case where I exclusively use the 770 is when I'm recording my voice in situations where I need monitoring. That's the application for which I find the DT770 to be irreplaceable with its incredible passive sound isolation and comfort for long sessions. And then there's the entertainment use of the DT770, namely movies and games. It is still my go-to set for these uses, since the boosted bass makes sound effects more immersive, while the sharp treble helps with directional cues, and the sound stage helps with the distancing and placement of targets. Although specifically for FPS games, there is a case to be made for the open-back version of this headphone, the DT990 Pro, that has much wider sound stage that will be an advantage on competitive titles, if you can deal with the sound leak and the lack of sound isolation on those. As for music, I can still use the DT770 for rock, pop, and EDM, although I tend to go for open backs such as the slightly higher priced Sennheiser HD6XX and Beyerdynamic's own DT880 for vocal and instrumental tracks. I think my own use case of this headphone is a good template for my recommended uses for the DT770. So if you record your own voice or any kind of music and need to monitor the process, the DT770 Pro is hard to beat for its price. Also, if excellent passive sound isolation is a must, this will also be the headphone for you. And on top of all that, if you watch lots of movies and play games on your computer, the DT770 will also be a fantastic choice there. While it would not be my first recommendation for critical music listening, if you mostly listen to rock, pop, country, hip-hop, or EDM, the DT770 will hold its own with not much of a problem, although it doesn't do a tremendous job with jazz or classic music or tracks with more emphasis on vocals. Alright, as usual, any questions or comments, just leave them below or on my subreddit, and you know I'll be there to answer. Links for absolutely everything are in the video description below. And as soon as my part 3 of this series is up in the next few days, you can check it out right here. Meanwhile, click here to see my recent review of the amazing Vertex Arc 60 custom mechanical keyboard. Thanks for watching, and see you all soon.